It was a bright and sunny afternoon in the heart of the city. The streets were full of life, with people walking briskly to get to their appointments, shopkeepers calling out to attract customers, and the distant sound of traffic blending with occasional honks. Among the crowd moved Sophia Reynolds, a young woman in her mid-twenties, who carried herself with confidence and grace. Her brown hair flowed gently in the breeze, and her sharp eyes scanned the busy street as she walked, taking in the sights around her. She was dressed neatly in a casual but elegant outfit, carrying a small handbag with essentials, moving from one shop to another for her errands. She had a list of things to do that day, and despite the busyness around her, she maintained a calm and collected demeanor. Sophia had always enjoyed taking care of her own tasks, preferring to handle her errands herself rather than rely on anyone else. It gave her a sense of independence, and she took pride in being capable and organized. As she approached the local market area, she noticed the familiar hum of activity vendors selling fresh fruits, vegetables, and flowers, street musicians entertaining passers-by, and children laughing as they ran past with colorful balloons. The atmosphere was lively, yet she moved through it with a certain quiet elegance that seemed to make her stand out from the crowd. As Sophia paused to look at a display of fresh oranges, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned slightly and saw two uniformed police officers approaching. At first, she assumed they were just passing by, part of the routine presence that always patrolled busy streets. But as they came closer, she noticed the change in their expressions. Their eyes narrowed slightly, and their pace quickened. Something about their approach made her instinctively aware that this would not be a casual interaction. "Excuse me, miss," one of the officers called, his voice firm but not overly loud. "Can we speak with you for a moment?" Sophia looked at them calmly, her posture straight. "Of course," she said politely. "Is there a problem?" The officers didn't answer immediately. Instead, they glanced at each other, as if confirming something, and then one of them stepped slightly closer. "We just need to ask a few questions," he said. "We noticed you walking around, and we want to make sure everything is fine." Sophia nodded, her expression neutral. She was used to interactions with the public in her family life, as she often accompanied her father, a well-known public figure, to events. However, she had never encountered this kind of situation where officers approached her in public with an unclear concern. "I understand," she replied calmly. "But I assure you, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just running errands." The officer's gaze lingered on her for a moment, and she could sense a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Yet, instead of easing back, he continued with a questioning tone. "Do you have any identification with you?" he asked. Sophia reached into her handbag and took out her driver's license, handing it over politely. "Here," she said. "Is there something specific you're looking for?" The officers examined the card briefly. Their faces betrayed no immediate recognition. Sophia waited patiently, though she could feel the tension in the air. A small crowd had begun to form, noticing the interaction. Some people whispered to each other, curious about the reason for the officer's attention. Others pulled out their phones, ready to record in case the situation escalated. Sophia, aware of the attention, kept her composure. She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue aggressively, and didn't show any signs of panic. Her calm presence seemed to contrast sharply with the officer's somewhat rigid demeanor. One of the officers cleared his throat, leaning slightly closer as if trying to assert authority. "We just want to know why you were walking around this area. Some citizens reported suspicious behavior," he said. Sophia's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise. She had been walking calmly, observing the market, looking at flowers and fruits, and making sure she got everything on her list. There was nothing unusual about her behavior. She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not sure what could have appeared suspicious," she said gently. "I'm just a visitor to this area, going about my errands. I have done nothing illegal." The officers seemed unsatisfied with her answer. They asked more questions: where she was going, why she was alone, and whether she was waiting for someone. Sophia answered each one politely and clearly. She understood the importance of remaining calm and factual. Raising her voice or showing frustration would only make the officers more defensive, and she didn't want a harmless misunderstanding to become something more serious. Despite her patience, the officer's tone grew slightly more aggressive. One of them stepped closer than necessary, gesturing in a way that could have made anyone feel intimidated. Sophia, however, didn't flinch. She took a small step back to maintain her personal space but continued to speak respectfully. Her voice was steady, clear, and confident. "I understand your duty to ensure safety," she said. "But I assure you, I am not doing anything wrong. I am just going about my day like any other person." The tension in the area grew. The crowd watching became more curious, some whispering, some frowning at what they perceived as unnecessary harassment. Sophia noticed the reactions but remained focused on her own calm demeanor. She understood that public attention could either escalate or de-escalate the situation. By staying composed, she hoped to prevent unnecessary conflict. For a few minutes, the officers continued their questioning, seemingly unsure of what to do next. Sophia realized that this was a moment where her calmness and clarity could make a difference. She maintained eye contact, answered truthfully, and avoided any defensive gestures. The officers, despite their initial confidence, began to show signs of hesitation. Their brows furrowed as they looked around, noticing the growing attention of bystanders and the possible implications of their actions. Sophia, meanwhile, remained poised. She wasn't scared, though she felt a natural tension in the pit of her stomach. She knew that people sometimes misjudged situations, and misunderstandings could happen anywhere, even in the busiest streets. What mattered was how one handled such moments with dignity, clarity, and calmness. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of questioning, one of the officers sighed and glanced at his partner. They muttered something to each other under their breath, perhaps realizing that their approach had been too aggressive for a situation that didn't warrant it. Sophia noticed this subtle shift in behavior but didn't comment. She simply stood there, composed, waiting to see how the encounter would conclude. Unbeknownst to the officers, Sophia was not just any young woman walking the streets. She was the daughter of Governor Reynolds, a well-respected public official known for his integrity and leadership. At that moment, the officers had no idea of her identity, which meant that their actions were being observed without consideration of the consequences. Sophia had learned early in life the value of patience and tact, and those qualities were proving invaluable in this unexpected and tense encounter. As the crowd continued to gather, whispering and watching the unfolding scene, Sophia maintained her calm presence. She smiled politely when someone offered a concerned nod or whispered encouragement. Her grace under pressure contrasted sharply with the officer's increasingly awkward stance. She knew that remaining dignified was not just about her own safety but also about setting an example for those around her, showing that composure could transform even a difficult situation. The interaction had begun as a normal day of errands, a simple walk through the lively city streets. Yet it had transformed into a moment of tension, observation, and public scrutiny. Sophia's calm and confident handling of the situation, her clear communication, and her unwavering composure set the stage for the next chapter of this unexpected encounter. The officers, unaware of the identity of the woman before them, were about to experience a revelation that would change the entire dynamic of this encounter. As Sophia adjusted her handbag and prepared to continue her errands, she remained patient, knowing that how she conducted herself in these few moments could influence the outcome. The sun continued to shine, the crowd buzzed with curiosity, and the officers continued to linger, caught between protocol and uncertainty. This seemingly ordinary day was quietly building toward an extraordinary moment that no one on the street, except Sophia herself, could have predicted. The officers, though initially confident in their authority, began to show signs of unease as they continued their questioning. Sophia Reynolds stood calmly, her hands lightly resting on her handbag, her expression composed but alert. She could feel the subtle shift in the atmosphere around her, the tension in the air, the whispers of the growing crowd, and the occasional glance from people who had stopped to watch. What had started as a simple walk through the streets of the city had turned into something unexpected. She knew that her calmness would be her strongest ally in these moments, and she carefully chose each word as the officers pressed on. "Are you waiting for someone?" one of the officers asked, his voice firm yet laced with suspicion. Sophia shook her head gently, her voice steady. "No, I'm not waiting for anyone. I'm just running errands and visiting a few shops in the area." She offered a small, polite smile, hoping to ease the tension, but the officers remained skeptical. The other officer stepped closer, his posture slightly aggressive, as if trying to assert control over the situation. "You've been seen walking around this block several times," he said, leaning slightly toward her. "People are concerned. We need to know why you're here." Sophia maintained eye contact, careful not to appear intimidated. "I understand," she said calmly. "I do appreciate that you are doing your job, but I assure you, there is nothing suspicious about my presence here. I am simply visiting shops and taking care of some personal errands." The officers exchanged glances. Sophia could see the hesitation flicker across their faces, though they did not admit it aloud. They were used to being in control, and encountering someone who responded with such calm confidence and clarity was unexpected. Sophia noticed the small crowd that had gathered around them, some people filming the interaction on their phones, others whispering to each other. She realized that every moment now carried more weight, and she needed to remain composed to prevent the situation from escalating further. One officer adjusted his hat and cleared his throat. "May we see some identification?" he asked again, as if he hadn't already looked at her ID. Sophia reached into her handbag and handed over her driver's license once more. "Here it is," she said politely. "I have nothing to hide." The officers examined the ID closely. For a moment, they seemed to consider the situation carefully, as if trying to find a reason to let it go or a reason to escalate it. Sophia waited patiently, maintaining her composure. She could feel her heart beating steadily, aware of the attention around her but determined not to let it disturb her calm. The crowd was growing slowly. People whispered to each other, some expressing concern for the young woman, others wondering what had caused the officers to behave this way. Sophia noticed a few people shifting closer, subtly positioning themselves to witness the interaction, while others discreetly recorded the event. Despite this, she stood calmly, her demeanor showing no fear, only quiet confidence. She understood that people often respond to tension with fear or panic, but by remaining steady, she could influence the way the situation unfolded. "Do you live nearby?" one of the officers asked, trying to maintain a sense of authority. "No," Sophia replied evenly. "I live across town, and I came here for a few errands today. I have no reason to linger unnecessarily in this area." The officers seemed dissatisfied. They continued to question her about minor details: what shops she had visited, what she intended to buy, and even casual inquiries about her day. Sophia answered each question politely and clearly, never raising her voice or showing frustration. Her calm and collected manner contrasted sharply with the officers' increasingly tense behavior. She could sense that they were struggling to maintain control, unsure how to proceed without appearing unreasonable in front of the growing crowd. A few bystanders began whispering among themselves, expressing concern over the way the officers were treating Sophia. Some commented quietly that the questioning seemed unnecessary, while others noted how gracefully she was handling the situation. The whispers grew louder as more people stopped to watch, some recording the encounter on their phones. Sophia noticed the subtle shift in the officers' body language. Their aggressive stance had softened slightly, their gestures less forceful, their words more cautious. Despite the officers' persistence, Sophia remained composed. She spoke with clarity, her tone polite yet firm. "I respect your duty to ensure public safety," she said. "However, I am not doing anything wrong, and I hope this situation can be resolved quickly so that we all can continue with our day." The officers muttered to each other quietly, glancing at the crowd and realizing that they were under observation. Sophia recognized this subtle change in their demeanor. They were beginning to understand that their approach, if continued, could be perceived as harassment. She continued to respond politely, avoiding any confrontational language, understanding that calm communication could help defuse the tension. As the questioning continued, Sophia noticed small gestures from the bystanders. Some were nodding in support, while others whispered encouragement or exchanged glances that showed concern for the situation. She realized that her calm and respectful responses were influencing not just the officers, but also the public around her. By maintaining her dignity and composure, she was quietly demonstrating how to handle a tense situation with grace. At one point, one officer leaned slightly closer, his voice softer. "We just want to make sure everything is okay," he said. "People have reported unusual behavior, and we are responsible for ensuring safety." Sophia nodded, understanding his position. "I appreciate your concern," she said gently. "But I can assure you, I am here simply to run errands. I am not causing any trouble, and I hope this misunderstanding can be cleared up." The officers paused, looking at each other again. They seemed unsure how to respond, caught between protocol and the realization that they might be overstepping. Sophia maintained her calm, allowing a few moments of silence to pass. This pause gave the officers time to reconsider their actions and gave the crowd an opportunity to witness the unfolding interaction. The situation, though tense, remained peaceful due to Sophia's careful handling. She was aware that any display of anger, frustration, or fear could escalate the scenario, so she focused on maintaining her calm presence. Her ability to remain composed under pressure was remarkable, especially given the attention of the crowd and the authority of the officers questioning her. Minutes passed, and the officers continued their questioning, but their tone had softened noticeably. Sophia could see subtle signs of uncertainty in their eyes and gestures. They were beginning to realize that their assumptions might have been incorrect. The presence of the crowd, the subtle but steady recording of the incident on phones, and Sophia's calm composure all contributed to a growing awareness that the situation required careful handling. As the conversation continued, Sophia adjusted her handbag slightly, standing tall and poised. She noticed a few people whispering about her demeanor, expressing admiration for the way she handled the situation. Her calm confidence had begun to influence the dynamic, shifting it from a potentially hostile encounter to a moment of careful observation and reflection. Despite the officer's initial aggression, Sophia remained focused on her goal, to resolve the misunderstanding peacefully and calmly. She continued to answer their questions politely and clearly, maintaining eye contact and avoiding any gestures that could be misinterpreted. Her steady presence had a subtle but powerful effect, gradually diffusing the tension in the air. The officers, realizing that their approach was being closely watched and that they had no clear evidence of wrongdoing, began to show signs of hesitation. Their voices grew quieter, their gestures less forceful, and their posture more cautious. Sophia recognized these subtle changes and continued to respond with calm clarity, ensuring that the interaction remained under control and respectful. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officers paused, glancing at the crowd and then back at Sophia. There was a brief moment of silence, a pause in the tension that had been building for several minutes. Sophia remained composed, her calm demeanor serving as a reminder to everyone present that patience, clarity, and dignity could influence even the most challenging situations. At that moment, Sophia understood that the encounter was at a turning point. The officer's persistence had slowed, the crowd's attention had grown, and the dynamic had shifted. What had begun as a routine walk through the city had evolved into a tense and public interaction, highlighting the importance of composure, clarity, and calm communication in moments of uncertainty. Sophia's ability to remain calm under pressure was remarkable. She had handled the officer's aggressive questioning with patience and respect, demonstrating her intelligence, poise, and self-control. The scene had become more than just a simple encounter, it was a lesson in how dignity and composure could influence others, even in moments of potential conflict. Little did Sophia know, the true turning point of the encounter was about to arrive. The officers had no idea who they were dealing with, and the revelation of her identity would soon change the course of the interaction completely. But for now, Sophia continued to stand calmly, answering questions with clarity and grace, while the crowd watched, impressed by her composure and the quiet strength she displayed in the face of unnecessary harassment. The moment that would change everything was approaching, though neither the officers nor the crowd knew it yet. Sophia Reynolds continued to stand calmly, her eyes scanning the faces around her with quiet awareness. She had answered all their questions clearly, patiently, and with dignity, but she knew the next few moments would define how the situation unfolded. The officers were still tense, unsure of how to proceed, their authority suddenly feeling fragile under the scrutiny of the growing crowd. One officer adjusted his uniform nervously, glancing at Sophia again, and then at the bystanders, who were whispering excitedly among themselves. "You're making this difficult for us," he muttered, trying to regain a sense of control. "We need to know exactly who you are and why you're here." Sophia tilted her head slightly, her calm expression never faltering. "I have told you everything you need to know," she said softly but firmly. "I am here for personal errands. I am not causing any trouble. If there is nothing else, I hope this can end peacefully." At that moment, one of the officers' radios crackled with a voice from the station. He straightened immediately, his expression shifting from frustration to surprise. He quickly tapped a few buttons, speaking quietly but urgently into the device. Sophia watched him carefully, noticing the sudden change in his demeanor. Something had happened, something that was about to make the situation very different. "What's going on?" Sophia asked calmly, her curiosity subtle but genuine. She had already guessed that her identity might be recognized soon, but she let the moment unfold naturally. The officer glanced at her, his eyes widening slightly as if he was realizing something he had not expected. He looked at his partner, who mirrored the same expression of sudden awareness. "Wait, he began, his voice faltering as he struggled to find the right words. The crowd, sensing the shift in the officer's energy, leaned forward slightly, murmuring to one another in confusion. Sophia stood tall, her calm presence contrasting sharply with the officer's sudden panic. She could see the unease creeping into their posture, the hesitation in their voices, and the rapid exchange of glances between them. "You're Sophia Reynolds," the officer finally said, his voice shaky. "The governor's daughter." Sophia nodded, her composed expression never changing. "Yes," she replied quietly, her tone calm and measured. "I am the governor's daughter." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The officers froze, unable to process the revelation. Their earlier confidence had vanished completely, replaced by a mix of fear, embarrassment, and confusion. They had not expected the person they were harassing to be someone so powerful, someone whose family wielded significant influence. The crowd erupted into whispers and soft gasps, some people recording the moment on their phones, while others simply watched in stunned silence. The energy of the scene shifted dramatically. What had been a tense encounter between a young woman and the police had transformed into a public spectacle that no one would forget soon. One officer cleared his throat, attempting to regain composure, but it was clear that his authority had crumbled. We didn't know," he stammered. "We were just doing our job, ensuring safety." Sophia raised a hand gently, stopping him mid-sentence. "I understand that you were doing your job," she said softly. "But your actions were unnecessary, and they caused unnecessary discomfort." I hope this can be a learning moment for all of us. The officers exchanged nervous glances, realizing that their behavior had been witnessed by a growing number of bystanders. Their attempts to maintain authority now felt hollow, as the crowd's attention and the recording devices in people's hands highlighted every detail of their previous behavior. Sophia's calm yet firm words only amplified the contrast between her dignity and their misplaced aggression. The officer who had first approached her cleared his throat again, this time speaking more cautiously. We apologize for any misunderstanding," he said slowly. "We had no idea who you were. We only acted on what we thought was a report of suspicious activity." Sophia nodded, acknowledging the apology. "I accept your apology," she said calmly. "But I also hope you understand the responsibility that comes with authority. The way people are treated matters, regardless of their identity. Respect and professionalism should always guide your actions." The crowd murmured appreciatively, impressed by Sophia's poise and the way she had handled a situation that could have easily escalated. People whispered comments about her courage, her intelligence, and her calm demeanor under pressure. Some even commented on how rare it was to see someone handle harassment with such composure and dignity. The other officer, now visibly flustered, shifted nervously. We didn't realize," he repeated, his words almost a whisper. We're sorry." Sophia smiled slightly, her calmness never wavering. "I hope this apology is genuine," she said. "I also hope that this moment will remind you and your colleagues to think carefully before acting in the future." At that moment, Sophia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen briefly, seeing that it was her assistant calling. She answered politely, speaking quietly for a moment. The conversation was brief, but it seemed to resolve a matter of logistics. She then hung up, returning her attention to the officers and the crowd. Her composed handling of even this small interruption further reinforced the image of a poised, intelligent, and calm individual who could manage difficult situations effortlessly. The crowd continued to observe, some whispering excitedly, others capturing the unfolding scene on their devices. The officers, now visibly aware of the scrutiny, seemed unsure how to proceed. They realized that any further aggressive behavior would be seen as unacceptable, potentially causing serious consequences for themselves and their department. Sophia took a small step forward, her eyes meeting each officer's in turn. "I hope that today serves as a reminder," she said gently, "that every interaction matters. People deserve respect and understanding, and assumptions based on appearance or circumstance can lead to unnecessary conflict." Her words hung in the air, carrying a weight that was impossible to ignore. The officers nodded silently, their earlier confidence replaced with humility and reflection. They now understood that their actions had been inappropriate and that the presence of witnesses, coupled with Sophia's calm dignity, had made the gravity of their behavior impossible to ignore. As the situation began to settle, Sophia noticed a few bystanders approaching cautiously, expressing concern and offering kind words. She smiled politely, acknowledging their support without allowing the attention to overwhelm her. Her focus remained on ensuring that the situation concluded peacefully, without further conflict or misunderstanding. The officers, now fully aware of the significance of the encounter, took a step back. Their posture shifted from one of authority to one of respect, recognizing the influence and position of the young woman they had been questioning. They nodded, offering a more sincere and measured apology. "We sincerely apologize for our behavior," one officer said, his voice firm but respectful. "We understand our mistake, and we will take steps to ensure this does not happen again." Sophia inclined her head slightly. "Thank you," she replied. "I appreciate your acknowledgement. I hope this serves as a reminder that professionalism and respect are always necessary, no matter the circumstances." The crowd, now fully aware of the situation, began to disperse slowly, some murmuring about the surprising turn of events, others continuing to record snippets of the encounter. Sophia remained composed throughout, her calm presence a stark contrast to the earlier tension. She had managed not only to protect herself but also to turn a potentially hostile situation into a public lesson in dignity, respect, and the power of composure. As Sophia turned to leave, she noticed the officers watching her carefully, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and newfound respect. They had learned a valuable lesson about the importance of treating people with fairness and professionalism, regardless of the circumstances. Sophia walked away calmly, her steps measured and confident. The city around her seemed to resume its normal rhythm, but the memory of the encounter lingered. The crowd whispered among themselves, reflecting on what they had witnessed. Many would remember this moment for a long time, not just because of the revelation of her identity, but because of the way she had handled herself with such intelligence, grace, and dignity under pressure. The incident had started as a routine walk, turned tense through misunderstanding and assumptions, and ended as a public example of poise, patience, and the power of respectful communication. Sophia's ability to maintain calm and clarity had transformed the situation, leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved: officers, bystanders, and even those who would hear about it later through social media and news outlets. Though the encounter had been stressful, Sophia's composure had ensured that it ended peacefully and constructively. She understood the importance of turning a challenging moment into a learning opportunity, and she had done so without anger, frustration, or confrontation. In that moment, she exemplified not only personal strength but also the power of dignity, patience, and intelligent communication in the face of adversity. After the tense confrontation had ended, the city slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the story of what had just happened spread like wildfire. Sophia Reynolds walked through the streets with quiet confidence, yet her mind was alert, aware of the ripple effect her presence and actions were causing. Every step she took seemed to echo in the minds of the bystanders who had witnessed the scene, as if the energy of the event was still lingering in the air. People who had been recording the encounter on their phones were already sharing the videos on social media. Within minutes, clips of the incident were uploaded to multiple platforms. The footage showed the officer's initial aggression, Sophia's calm and dignified responses, and the moment of revelation when the officers realized who she was. Comments and reactions began flooding in, some praising Sophia for her courage and composure, others criticizing the officers for their behavior. The situation quickly became a trending topic, drawing attention from not only locals but people from across the country. As Sophia continued her walk, she noticed a few people approaching cautiously, offering polite nods or words of support. She smiled gently at them, acknowledging their concern without letting the attention overwhelm her. Even in the midst of chaos, she maintained a sense of calm that was almost magnetic. Her demeanor reminded people that dignity and patience often carry more weight than anger or confrontation. When she returned home, Sophia took a moment to reflect on what had happened. Sitting quietly in her living room, she replayed the events in her mind. She thought about the officer's initial actions, the tension that had built in the crowd, and the dramatic shift when her identity was revealed. She realized how quickly perceptions could change based on knowledge and context, and how dangerous assumptions could be. Her assistant, who had been keeping track of the growing social media attention, came into the room holding a tablet. "Sophia, the videos are going viral," they said. "People are sharing your story everywhere. There's a mix of reactions, but mostly admiration for how you handled everything." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "That's good," she said softly. "I want people to see that situations like this can be handled without anger. There's always a better way if we remain calm and respectful." The news outlets quickly picked up the story. Local newspapers and online platforms published articles describing the incident, highlighting Sophia's composure and the officer's misjudgment. Headlines praised her courage, her quick thinking, and the lesson in dignity she had provided to the public. The media attention was intense, but Sophia approached it with the same poise she had shown during the encounter itself. She knew that reacting impulsively to fame or attention could dilute the message she wanted to convey. The officers involved were placed on administrative review, and their department issued a formal statement acknowledging the incident. They admitted that their actions had been inappropriate and promised to conduct additional training to ensure that situations like this would not happen again. While some criticized the department for being reactive rather than proactive, others acknowledged the steps taken to address the issue. Sophia followed the developments closely, hoping that the incident would lead to meaningful change rather than being dismissed as a viral moment. In the days that followed, Sophia received messages of support from people she didn't even know. Some were local residents who had witnessed the scene firsthand, while others were strangers who had seen the videos online. Messages praised her courage, intelligence, and calmness under pressure. Many expressed gratitude for the example she had set, emphasizing how her actions had inspired them to remain composed in challenging situations in their own lives. Sophia reflected on these messages with a sense of humility. She appreciated the support, but she also recognized the responsibility that came with public attention. She understood that people were looking up to her not just because of her family or status, but because of how she handled adversity. She felt a deep sense of duty to continue setting a positive example, knowing that her actions could influence others in meaningful ways. At school, the incident sparked conversations among students and teachers alike. Discussions focused on respect, authority, and the importance of remaining calm in stressful situations. Some students admitted that they had witnessed unfair treatment in their own lives but had felt powerless to respond. Seeing Sophia's example gave them hope and a sense of empowerment. Teachers encouraged students to reflect on the lessons from the incident, emphasizing empathy, understanding, and the value of measured responses. Sophia also took the time to meet with her parents to discuss the incident and its aftermath. They expressed concern for her safety but were proud of how she had handled the situation. Her mother gently reminded her, "It's not just about what you did in that moment, Sophia. It's about the lesson you're teaching others and the influence you have on those around you." Her father nodded in agreement. "You've shown courage and intelligence, but more importantly, you've shown respect and patience. That is what people will remember, and it will shape the way others think and act." Sophia thought about the future. She realized that while the incident had started as a simple walk, it had turned into a meaningful lesson in leadership, empathy, and responsibility. She considered how she could use the experience to contribute positively to her community, perhaps by participating in programs that teach young people about conflict resolution, communication skills, and the importance of dignity in every interaction. Meanwhile, the officers involved were adjusting to the consequences of their actions. Some expressed genuine regret, while others struggled with the public scrutiny. Training programs were organized to address issues of bias, communication, and professional conduct. The incident became a case study for the department, illustrating how quickly situations could escalate and the importance of handling encounters with patience and respect. Social media continued to buzz with discussions about the event. Influencers and activists highlighted the story as an example of how courage and calmness could confront misunderstanding and bias. Memes, videos, and posts circulated widely, often emphasizing Sophia's composure and the lesson of dignity over aggression. The story inspired countless conversations about fairness, empathy, and accountability in everyday interactions. Sophia herself remained grounded throughout the attention. She focused on her studies, her responsibilities, and the ways she could help others understand the importance of respectful communication. She met with community leaders to discuss initiatives for promoting awareness, empathy, and understanding in schools, workplaces, and public spaces. Her efforts were not motivated by recognition but by a genuine desire to make a positive difference. As the weeks passed, the incident became a symbol of how one person's calm, composed response could influence many. People who had witnessed or heard about the event began to reflect on their own behavior, considering how they could handle difficult situations with dignity rather than reacting impulsively. Sophia's actions had created a ripple effect, encouraging others to act thoughtfully and respectfully in their daily lives. Sophia also took time to write down her reflections in a journal. She wanted to remember the lessons she had learned and the emotions she had experienced during the encounter. Writing allowed her to process the event fully, understanding not only the external consequences but also the internal growth she had experienced. She reflected on her ability to remain calm, her understanding of human behavior, and the power of empathy and patience. Through her reflection, she realized that true courage was not about confrontation or aggression, it was about maintaining integrity, dignity, and composure even in challenging situations. She understood that every action, every word, and every response carried weight, influencing not only the immediate situation but also the broader community. The incident also sparked conversations within the city about the importance of public awareness and accountability. Community meetings were organized to discuss respectful interactions, conflict resolution, and the responsibility of authority figures to act fairly and professionally. Sophia was invited to speak at several gatherings, sharing her experience and emphasizing the lessons learned. Her message resonated deeply, encouraging others to act with empathy, patience, and dignity in all aspects of life. Even as the public attention eventually began to settle, the lessons from the incident remained. Sophia's calm, composed response had created lasting change, inspiring individuals, organizations, and communities to reconsider how they approach difficult situations. Her actions had shown that one person's courage, intelligence, and respect could influence many, creating a legacy of dignity and understanding that would endure far beyond the immediate moment. Sophia continued her daily life with grace, balancing her responsibilities, studies, and community involvement. She remained aware of the influence she carried, not as a source of pressure, but as a reminder of the responsibility to act with integrity and empathy. Every encounter, every interaction, became an opportunity to demonstrate the lessons she had learned, reinforcing the importance of calmness, patience, and respect in shaping positive outcomes. The incident, which had begun as an unexpected challenge during a simple walk, became a pivotal moment in Sophia's life. It strengthened her understanding of human behavior, enhanced her sense of responsibility, and inspired her to continue advocating for fairness, empathy, and dignity. In doing so, she transformed a potentially negative experience into a source of empowerment, not only for herself but for everyone who witnessed or heard her story. Through it all, Sophia's composure and grace remained unwavering. She had faced misunderstanding, public scrutiny, and a tense confrontation with authority figures, yet she had emerged not only unharmed but stronger, wiser, and more influential. Her story became a reminder that courage is not measured by confrontation, but by the ability to remain calm, act with integrity, and inspire positive change through dignity and respect. As the weeks turned into months, the story of that tense encounter slowly became more than just a viral moment, it became a catalyst for change. Sophia Reynolds had not only faced a challenging situation with remarkable calm and dignity, but she had also inspired a community to think differently about respect, empathy, and fairness. The impact of her actions was still unfolding, touching lives in ways she had never expected. Sophia continued her daily routine with quiet determination. She went to school, attended classes, and worked on her studies, but she also made time for community projects that she felt could make a real difference. She joined a youth leadership group that focused on building awareness about communication, conflict resolution, and understanding diversity. Her experience had given her credibility and insight that made her an influential voice in the group. During one of the group's meetings, Sophia shared her story in detail. She described the encounter, the way the officers had initially treated her, and the moment when her identity was revealed. She spoke about how she had managed to stay calm and composed, and why it had been important to act with dignity rather than anger. The other members of the group listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others taking notes. They were inspired by her words, seeing how one person's actions could influence many. Her story also began to inspire new initiatives in her community. Schools started hosting workshops on respectful behavior, communication skills, and empathy. Students were encouraged to reflect on their actions and think about how they treated others. Teachers emphasized the importance of understanding and patience in their classrooms, hoping to prevent conflicts before they started. Sophia was invited to attend some of these sessions as a guest speaker, and her presence gave the lessons even greater weight. Sophia's parents continued to support her every step of the way. They were proud of how she had handled the situation and how she had turned a stressful moment into an opportunity for learning and growth. "You've turned a challenge into a lesson for everyone," her mother said one evening. "Not many people can do what you've done." Her father added, "The true measure of courage is not in confrontation, but in knowing how to respond wisely and with integrity. You've shown that, and it will continue to inspire people." Meanwhile, the officers involved in the incident had gone through additional training and counseling. They had met with community leaders to discuss how misunderstandings could be prevented in the future. Some officers expressed genuine regret for their actions, acknowledging that assumptions and biases could lead to mistakes. Others struggled with the public scrutiny, but the department emphasized accountability and transparency as essential steps toward improving relationships with the community. The local government also took notice. Meetings were held to review policies regarding public interactions, and new guidelines were proposed to ensure respectful behavior in all encounters. Sophia was invited to participate in discussions about these policies, providing input from her perspective as someone who had personally experienced the impact of unfair assumptions. Her voice was clear, thoughtful, and compelling, and it influenced how the city approached community engagement and law enforcement practices. Social media continued to play a role in keeping the story alive. People shared their reflections on Sophia's actions, discussing what they had learned and how they could apply it in their own lives. Her story became an example of courage and integrity for young people, parents, teachers, and community leaders alike. Videos of her interviews, talks, and workshops circulated widely, inspiring others to think about how they treated others in everyday interactions. Sophia herself remained humble throughout all the attention. She knew that the story was not about fame or recognition, it was about making a difference and showing that dignity, patience, and empathy could change situations for the better. She often reminded herself that every small action mattered and that kindness and respect could create ripples far beyond what anyone could see. At school, Sophia noticed changes in how students interacted with each other. Conflicts that might have escalated before were now often resolved with calm discussion and understanding. Teachers praised students for showing empathy and encouraging one another. It was clear that Sophia's influence had extended beyond her immediate circle, shaping the culture of her school in subtle but meaningful ways. Sophia also took time to reflect on her personal growth. She realized that the incident had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, patience, and leadership. She understood the importance of controlling her emotions, thinking before reacting, and maintaining dignity even in the face of unfair treatment. These lessons were not just for her public life, they would guide her in every interaction, every challenge, and every decision she faced in the future. Her reflections were not limited to her own experiences. Sophia began writing articles and essays about her journey, sharing insights about empathy, communication, and conflict resolution. She wanted to provide practical advice for others who might face difficult situations. Her writing emphasized that courage was not about confrontation, but about acting thoughtfully, speaking wisely, and showing respect in every interaction. The community recognized Sophia's efforts in many ways. Local newspapers and websites highlighted her workshops, her writings, and her contributions to improving understanding between citizens and authority figures. Awards and honors were offered, but Sophia accepted them with grace, always redirecting attention to the importance of empathy, respect, and community responsibility rather than personal recognition. Over time, the officers involved in the incident began to engage more positively with the community. Some participated in workshops and discussions alongside Sophia, learning from her perspective and experiences. These interactions helped to rebuild trust and demonstrated that positive change was possible when people were willing to reflect, listen, and grow. Sophia also became involved in mentoring younger students. She encouraged them to think critically, act thoughtfully, and maintain dignity in all situations. She helped them understand that even small acts of patience and respect could prevent misunderstandings and conflicts. Her guidance was practical and relatable, grounded in real-life experiences that students could connect with. Her efforts gradually created a lasting impact on the community. Conflicts were less frequent, communication improved, and there was a growing culture of understanding and empathy. People began to think before they acted, considering the consequences of their words and behaviors. Sophia's influence had extended far beyond the initial incident, demonstrating how one person's calm and thoughtful response could shape an entire community. At home, Sophia continued to receive support and encouragement from her family. They reminded her that the work she was doing was meaningful and that her actions had lasting value. They also encouraged her to continue pursuing her education and personal goals, emphasizing that her influence was even more powerful when combined with knowledge and skill. Sophia's story also reached other cities and regions. People who had never heard of her before were inspired by her courage, composure, and thoughtfulness. Schools and community groups invited her to speak, seeking guidance on creating programs that promoted empathy, understanding, and respect. Each new audience offered an opportunity to share lessons learned and encourage positive behavior in others. Through it all, Sophia remained grounded. She knew that change was not instant, and that challenges would continue to arise. But she had learned that patience, calmness, and dignity could guide her through even the most difficult situations. She trusted that her actions, however small they might seem in the moment, could influence people in ways that mattered for years to come. The incident that had once caused tension and fear had become a turning point for Sophia, her community, and even those who had initially misjudged her. It demonstrated the power of courage tempered with wisdom, and the impact that one person could have on the attitudes and behaviors of many. Sophia had not only faced a challenging moment with grace, but she had also turned it into a source of education, inspiration, and change. Looking ahead, Sophia felt a sense of purpose and direction. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, but she was confident in her ability to face them with integrity, empathy, and composure. She knew that every action mattered, and that her example could guide others in ways both seen and unseen. The lessons of that day, the power of patience, the importance of understanding, and the influence of dignity became a part of her identity. They shaped her interactions, her decisions, and her goals. Sophia realized that true courage was not about confrontation, but about using one's strength to inspire positive change, even in the most unexpected circumstances. As the story of that encounter continued to circulate, its meaning deepened. It was no longer just an incident, it was a lesson in humanity. It reminded everyone that even in moments of fear or misunderstanding, calmness, empathy, and dignity could guide the way. Sophia's actions had transformed a moment of tension into a lasting legacy, creating ripples of influence that would continue to inspire others for years to come. In the end, Sophia's journey reflected the truth that each person has the power to create change. Through courage, composure, and thoughtful action, she had turned a challenging encounter into a powerful story of resilience and influence. Her experience became a beacon for others, showing that integrity, respect, and empathy could triumph over misunderstanding and conflict. Sophia continued to live her life with purpose, always mindful of the lessons she had learned and the example she had set. She carried with her the knowledge that every action mattered, every word had weight, and every moment offered an opportunity to inspire, educate, and create positive change. Her story remained a testament to the power of patience, dignity, and courage, leaving a lasting mark on her community and beyond.